$5,000 for a house in Japan. It is one of the most repeated numbers on the internet, showing up in headline after headline, video after video, always with the same tone of disbelief. So before this channel adds one more video to that pile, it deserves an actual fact check. Is $5,000 a real price someone can pay for an actual Japanese house? Or is it a rounded down, best case number stretched into a headline because it sounds more shocking than the truth? The honest answer sits somewhere in between, and getting it right matters, because believing the wrong number is exactly how a buyer ends up disappointed at the very first listing they click on. Start with what Akiya listings actually look like in aggregate, not the single cheapest example anyone can dig up. Across the major listing platforms, most Akiya cluster between roughly $3,500 and $35,000, with rural properties commonly found under $6,500. So $5,000 is not a fabricated number. It sits inside a real, observed price range. But it sits near the very bottom of it, not in the middle. A viewer who sees $5,000 house and assumes that is a typical, easy-to-find price is setting an expectation the actual market rarely meets on the first search or the 10th. It helps to understand why the distribution shapes up this way at all. Japan's vacant house inventory runs into the millions, concentrated overwhelmingly in areas losing population, and pricing at this end of the market is not set by demand the way a normal home sale is. It is closer to what an owner will accept just to stop paying property tax on a building nobody wants, which is why some listings drift toward nearly free, and a small number of municipalities occasionally give a house away outright, conditions attached. $5,000 sits in that same gravitational pull, a real price, generated by real desperation to offload a liability, not by a thriving bargain market. So what does a genuine $5,000 listing look like when one does turn up? Almost never a house in any normal sense of the word. At this price, the structure is usually the least valuable part of the transaction, often already collapsing, sometimes technically standing, but functionally a demolition project rather than a renovation one. What you are really purchasing is the land underneath it, priced low because the location is remote even by rural Japan standards, far from a train line, a hospital, or reliable infrastructure. Some of the very cheapest listings carry complications that suppress the price further still. Unclear inheritance history, multiple family members with a legal claim, or conditions the local Akiya bank attaches to screen out casual buyers. Even the fees stay largely fixed regardless of how low the purchase price goes. A judicial scrivener still has to register the transfer, closing paperwork still applies, and a structural inspection is, if anything, more urgent on a $5,000 building than a pricier one. None of that makes the $5,000 house fake. It makes it a specific, narrow category of property, not a representative one. Here is the part worth understanding about the headline itself, not just the house. When a figure sits at the extreme tail of a price range, it becomes irresistible for headlines and video titles, because $5,000 generates far more curiosity than houses in Japan commonly run $10,000 to $35,000. Even though the second statement is the one that actually describes what most buyers will encounter. This is not unique to Japan or to Akiya. It is how virtually all incredible price content gets made. Find the single most extreme real example, and let it stand in for the whole category. Of flights to Europe for $50, headline works the same way. Real on one specific route, on one specific day, for one specific seat, and quietly misleading the moment it is generalized into flights to Europe cost $50. The number is not a lie. It is a selectively chosen truth, and the gap between a selectively chosen truth and a typical one is exactly where unrealistic expectations get built, and where disappointed buyers eventually blame the country instead of the headline that misled them. Yes, a $5,000 Japanese house is real, in the narrow sense that listings at or near that price genuinely exist and occasionally get sold. No, it is not the number a realistic buyer should plan around, and treating it as typical is the fastest way to end up frustrated 3 listings into an actual search. The number that better describes this market is a range, roughly $10,000 to $35,000 for something resembling an actual, standing, livable structure with real land attached, before renovation costs enter the picture at all. None of that makes Japan's cheap house market any less remarkable. A wealthy, developed country with real, walkable inventory in that price range remains genuinely unusual in the world. It just is not $5,000 unusual, most of the time, and a channel built on being more accurate than the headlines has to say so, even when the bigger number would get more clicks. If this made Japan's empty house market a little clearer, subscribe to Akiya Handbook, the channel that explains how Japan's cheap houses actually work, honestly, and without selling you anything. There is also a free guide waiting in the description, the Akiya Buyer's Starter Guide, how to buy a cheap house in Japan without getting burned. 11 chapters on the truth about so-called free houses, the hidden costs, and who should not buy. No hype, and completely free. The link is below. Thanks for watching.